Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to our viewers to the 12th, I believe, right? Virtual seminar on applied economics and policy analysis in Central Asia. I'm your moderator, Bahram Mirkasimov from Westminster International University in Tashkent. Today, we're very privileged to have two speakers. The main speaker is Dr. Kamiljon Akramov. As most of you may know him already from our discussions previously. He will discuss today his paper on the policy of agricultural land allotment to households and its impact on productivity and household welfare in Tajikistan. Dr. Akramov is a senior research fellow at Development Strategy and Governance Division at the International Food Policy Research Institute. He's originally from Uzbekistan. He finished his PhD at Rand Graduate School, and and he has quite a big list of published articles and lots of conference presentations around the world and in leading economics journals. And we're also very honored to have IFPRI Babajanov to discuss and give his thoughts on the paper. Dr. IFPRI Babajanov, also originally from Uzbekistan. He's currently a research associate at the Leibniz Institute of Agriculture Development in Transition Economies, IAMO, based in Halle, Germany. Dr. Babajanov finished his PhD at the University of Bonn. He's quite a frequent traveler to Central Asia region. He has projects here, and he's also very well published and experienced scholar himself. So thank you very much to both of you for joining us today. So without further ado, Kamiljon, over to you.
Thank you, Bahram, and assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know we have viewers from US, from Europe, from Central Asia, even from far east of Asia. So today's presentation based on the paper on policy of agricultural land allotment to households and its impact on household welfare in Tajikistan. This is a joint work with a colleague of mine from IFPRI, Jaral Qasim Ilyasov, and Samuel Nas from University of Maryland. He's also works with us at IFPRI, and Tanzila Irgasha from Tajik Academy of Agricultural Sciences. And access to land is a key factor of rural livelihood, not only in Central Asia, in many parts of the world. And that's why access to land is very important factor of household welfare. And many successful reformers or countries which succeeded in economic development in achieving actually very high levels of household welfare, started their reforms with the land reform. South Korea in 1950s, China in 1970s, and more recently, Vietnam did land reform in the beginning of their reform process. So in Central Asia, access to land is very important, as you all know, and a lot of people, majority of people in countries like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan still live in the rural areas, so access to land is the key factor of their livelihood. So in this paper, we look at the one policy which was implemented in 1990s, in mid-1990s in Tajikistan. With the presidential degree in 1995, about 50,000 hectares of land were allocated to households for farming without the right to build houses and other household facilities. The second degree in 1997 allocated another 25,000 hectares of land to households, again without the right to build houses and other household facilities, just for agriculture. And altogether 75,000 hectares of agricultural land was allocated to households. This is substantial. This is about 8 to 10% of total arable land in Tajikistan. So in this study, we provide evidence on the impact of this policy on crop diversity and household welfare, specifically the dietary diversity. So why dietary diversity? Because it is one of the key factors of household welfare. It is strongly correlated with per capita calorie consumption, dietary energy intake, and also nutritional outcomes. Papers by Marie Ruel, published in top health journal Lancet, provides evidence on this. And dietary diversity also a strong predictor of diet quality in terms of micronutrient intake and some other factors. So why crop diversity? Crop diversity is by itself very important for sustainable agricultural development, but it's also linked, especially in the environment where market development is not up to date. So farmers' data diversity pretty much depends on crop diversity. So research question in this paper, how does access to presidential land in Tajikistan affect crop diversity and data diversity? So we have two dependent variables or factors here. Crop diversity, we measure it by the number of crops grown by a given household. Data diversity, we have 4 indicators. First indicator based on the survey data we use in this research. So number of food groups consumed by a household member during last 24 hours. So, and we have 3 additional measures. We use, again, our data, survey data, to come up with these measures, but we use FAO's guidelines for food groups 16, 12, and 9 food groups. So I will start with the preview of the results. So household access to presidential land is associated with significantly higher crop diversity and also considerably higher data diversity of households. So our results also hint that access to presidential land likely leads to higher data diversity through both higher crop diversity and also productivity or yields. Our findings also suggest that households with higher female education, schooling, and assets, and also with the migrants are likely to have higher dietary diversity. So now I will talk a little bit about the motivation. So land reform, farming organization, privatization of agriculture played an important role in agricultural transformation in transition countries. So in the 1990s, almost all of these countries started with land reform and farming organization and so on. And it's pretty well documented in the literature, and paper by Rosell and Swindon in the Journal of Economic Literature provides lots of evidence about this. So increased access to land led to higher productivity, food security, and household welfare, not only in Central Asia or elsewhere, but also in transition countries like China, which started land reform or economic reform much earlier than the countries in the former Soviet Union in Eastern Europe. So evidence also suggests that smaller farms are more productive per unit of area compared to large farms. However, some argue that land fragmentation may lead to misallocation of resources and duplication of tasks, causing lower agricultural productivity. So not all allocation of land to households or to farm households happened not only in transition countries, but also in some developing countries like the Philippines and Pakistan. So I cite here two papers, one by Adamopoulos and Restucia, which was recently published in the American Economic Journal. They looked at evidence from the Philippines, and they found that reallocation of land to smallholders led to lower agricultural productivity. Another paper by Elahi and his co-authors from Pakistan looked at the unique evidence from Punjab province of Pakistan. They found there's a reallocation of land to landless people with agrarian background actually led to higher productivity and improved household welfare. So there are a lot of evidence on the linkages between agricultural diversity or crop diversity and dietary diversity. So I list here several papers published in economics and nutrition journals. So diversification also plays, agricultural diversification plays important role in sustaining agricultural livelihoods and also reducing farmers' risks, both production and market risks, which leads to better household welfare and also helps to reduce poverty and so on. And all these papers deal with challenges of causality and some with successful implementation of modern econometric techniques. But there are concerns about external validity of these findings, especially papers use evidence from different parts of the world, and can we generalize those results to Central Asian countries, for example, because access to land and also agriculture practice is very local specific, and so we have to deal with those concerns as well. And as you know, there are a lot of concerns about land fragmentation and productive gaps in Central Asian countries, and I, with a couple of co-authors, actually documented this in the Kyrgyzstan case, in Tajikistan case, in the case of Tajikistan, and a lot of discussion about this in Uzbekistan as well, and they try to optimize farm size and to I mean, this debate is still ongoing, even at the household level. And so this raises important question. What is the evidence on the relationship between improved household access to land, crop diversity, and household welfare in Central Asia? So we try to provide evidence using a unique policy and unique data from Tajikistan. So I will provide now a little bit context about agriculture in Tajikistan. Agriculture employs significant share of labor. Data from the Tajik Agency on Statistics shows actually more than 60% of labor force in Tajikistan employed in agricultural sector. But agriculture provides a smaller share of value. About 1/5 of GDP comes from agriculture. If you compare this to other Central Asian countries, especially in terms of employment, you see striking difference with Tajikistan and other Central Asian countries. So in terms of farm types, this is more common in Central Asia these days. There are 3 types of agricultural producers or farms. Agricultural enterprises still exist, And in Tajikistan, they use about 10 to 15% of total arable land area. And Deccan farms, in some countries is called individual Deccan farms or collective Deccan farms. And they are main players in agricultural sector in all Central Asian countries, except probably northern part of Kazakhstan, where large agriculture enterprises play very key role in the wheat sector. Household plots or households play very important role, although their share is still very small in total land area. In Tajikistan, it's about 12 to 15% of total land area, but they produce big share of agricultural production, especially in horticulture sector and livestock sector. So now I will provide a little bit context from the study region where we did actually our survey. And this is Hatlan province of Tajikistan. It is the largest province in Tajikistan. It's in the southern part of Tajikistan. Hatlan combines former two oblasts, Korgantepe and Kolab. Our study focuses more on the Korgantepe part of the Hatlan province. So cotton and wheat still remain major crops in Hatlan. The cotton and wheat share in total land area, arable land area is about 80%, but horticulture cropland grew significantly faster during the last decade. And so allocation of more land for horticulture led to substantial growth of fruits and vegetable production in Hatlan province. So Hatlan became, as a result, the largest producer of fruits and vegetables in Tajikistan. Latest data suggests about 40% of fruits and about 55% of vegetables produced in Tajikistan come from Hatlan. So evidence also suggests that horticulture production grew not only because of more land, but also due to increasing yields. So in this slide, I show actually the production of vegetables in Hatlan and the different farm types and also fruits. And you can see how household farms are important both in vegetable production and especially in fruits. So despite this growth, we observed significant yield gaps between household plots and other farm types, especially in fruit sector, in fruit production. In the vegetable sector, vegetable yields between household farms and Deccan farms are merging, it looks like, but still vegetable yields in Deccan, in household plots are much higher than in Deccan farms. So again, if you compare fruits and vegetable yields in the study region, in the part of Hatlan province, which includes about 12 districts, grew much faster than compared to other parts of that Hatlan province. One of the reasons we believe this is because this is a vast valley where actually land is very fertile. And when the government started to loosen the policy and gave more land to households and also allowed Deccan farmers to grow vegetables, this led actually to much higher growth rates of yields in this part of the country. So now household survey data, our main data comes from our survey, which we conducted in 2018 together with the Zerkala Analytics Group in Tajikistan. And so also we worked with researchers from Tajik Academy of Agricultural Sciences, they helped us with the focus group studies and also looking at the value chains, which is not part of this study here, actually. So our sample includes 1,200 or 1,200 households from 12 districts of Hatlam province. Out of this 1,200 households, 482 households have access to presidential land, and about 290 or almost 300 households engaged in individual dehqan farming. So in this map, you can see that the study region, 12 districts of Tajikistan, and this is maybe in the map it looks very small area, but given that actually this eastern part of Tajikistan mostly mountains, most of the people live actually in the north and in the south. So in terms of population, this area is actually very large. Share of population in total Tajikistan's total population is very substantial. So as I mentioned, actually, we have actually three types of producers, households, and individual dehqan farms and agriculture enterprises. But in this survey, we have data from households and individual dehqan farms. Households have two types of plots: household plots and also presidential plot. Not all households, but those households, about 500 households which have access to presidential plot. So average plot size for household plots is about 0.15 hectares or 15 sotka. And for presidential plots, about 11 sotka, and individual dehqan farms, about 2.5 hectares. This could be the share of the household in collected dehqan farm, or it could be the just individual dehqan farm household is engaged in. And most of households, almost all of those households have possess legal document for their household plot and also their presidential plot. So most of this land is irrigated. You know, irrigation is very important for agriculture in Central Asia. But in terms of soil quality, this is again self-reported soil quality. About half of the households, they report that they have very good soil quality. Land degradation is a huge problem in not only in Tajikistan, but in the entire Central Asia region. There are a lot of evidence on that, actually. So in our data also shows that households say land degradation is a big issue for them. And so in our analysis, we have 1,200 households with the household plots. As I mentioned, about 500 or a little less than 500 of them have access to presidential plot. And many households farm it 2 seasons. So in this slide, I show breakdown by household plots, presidential plots, individual dehqans, first farming season and second farming season. You can see in the first farming season, households mostly grow horticulture crops. In the second farming season, they grow forage crops to support their livestock. But in the presidential land, about half of the households in the first farming season grow horticulture crops, mainly vegetables. But if you look at individual dehqan farms, most of these producers actually they grow either cotton or other technical crops. And in the second farming season, they grow horticulture crops, grains, or some other forage crops. So commonly grown crops among households surveyed are actually potato. About 60% of households report they grow potato. And about 60% of households again report they grow tomato, and so on. If we break down this by plot types, household plots, in the household plots, they grow mainly tomato, potato, cucumber, or they have the gardens, apricot or grape. In the presidential plots, they grow mainly wheat, potato, or some forage crops like alfalfa and corn for forage. So in Deccan farms, mainly they grow cotton and wheat, maybe to some extent potato, tomato, and onion. So in terms of input use, access to fertilizers and chemicals seem limited. Not all households report that they have access to fertilizer or chemicals. But so in terms of improved seeds, seedlings, and saplings, actually access to better seed or improved seed and seedlings and saplings is very important for productivity in terms of yield, and also it's very important for crop diversity. So in this table, you can see that there is a huge variation in terms of access to improved seeds and seedlings and saplings by plot types and also by crop types. And so let me see how I'm doing with the time. I think
we have 10 minutes left, Kamiljon.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of machinery use, actually nearly all farmers use machinery for plowing, but for other activities, there is very limited access to machinery, agricultural machinery. So also most households rely on family labor, and very small fraction of households use hired labor, mainly in rented land and Deccan farms. And in this table, you can see actually share of households which use machinery for other activities other than plowing, and they may use sprays, for example, for spraying their gardens, apricot or almond or grape, and so on. And they may also use for harvesting of potatoes or tomatoes and so on. Now we have two groups. In this table, we compare diversity indicators, crop diversity and dietary diversity indicators for treated and untreated groups. Treated group is actually households with access to presidential land, and treated group is households without access to presidential land. You can see here clear gap in terms of crop diversity and also in terms of data diversity between these two groups. And this, for example, in the households with access to presidential land grow about 1.5 on this is mean, on average of 1.5 crops more than households without access to presidential land. In terms of data diversity, depending on which indicator you use, actually you see again gap in terms of their diets, their data diversity. So these differences are significant if you use a simple two-sample t-statistics. But allocation of presidential land was not random, so we can't rely on two-sample t-statistics. So why? Because observed differences in crop diversity and data diversity between households with and without presidential land could be due to the selection problem, not due to the access to presidential land itself. So we can try to use standard OLS regression. It will give pretty good picture of the situation, but again, because selection or allocation of presidential land was not random, again, it may give us very biased estimate. It may overestimate and underestimate depending on the selection problem. So we use propensity score matching and inverse probability weighting techniques to estimate the effect of access to presidential land on crop diversity and dietary diversity. This helps to reduce the bias. We don't claim here we are getting rid of the bias totally. Still, bias may be there because, again, this is not randomized assignment, or this is not randomized control trial. So propensity score matching uses propensity score values as the conditional probability of receiving access to presidential land given given covariate values, and this helps us to create counterfactual group. In this probability weighting technique, uses propensity score values to weight outcome values. So there is actually very growing literature on these techniques, and I just cite here Abadi and Katanay's 2018 paper, which reviews these techniques. And so professionals from our profession, economics, and also from health and other professions doing a lot of research, a lot of advancement in this area. So looking or reading this paper on some others, actually you can get pretty good idea about these techniques. And I'm not providing here any mathematics because for this virtual type of presentation, it will be very difficult to convey that here. So empirical, our setup, what we said, we assume that access to presidential land is as treatment, and outcomes crop diversity and dietary diversity here, and we consider number of confounders using the language of econometrics. So crop diversity is only for dietary diversity, but some others, poverty index, household size, number of children, household heads education, schooling score, female education score, and livestock, whether households have livestock or dairy cow, and household assets, different types of assets we consider was production and household assets, and whether household has a migrant. As you know, migration is very important for not only for Tajikistan, for some other countries of the region. And we also consider ethnic background of the household. And we, in creating these variables, we use actually some innovative techniques from Innovative Poverty Action Lab. So school score is not just them variables. School score is actual score. Female education score is also is based on the IPA's methodology. It's not just them. So this is very important for econometrics part of the research. So we try to estimate average treatment effect first, but average treatment effect is biased because our treated group and control group are not similar because selection to these groups are not random. So average treatment effect is the difference between the outcomes of these two groups. We try to estimate average treatment effect on treated, which is the difference between the outcomes of treated and the outcomes of the counterfactual group, which we created using propensity score matching and also inverse probability weighting techniques. And so counterfactual group is not observable, so we had to estimate this. And we use actually Stata to commands from Stata PC match 2 and TFX, so to estimate PCM and IPW estimators. So in this table, I just summarized the results from OLS and matching and weighting estimator results. So you can, looking this actually, you can see that this each number, this is a difference in terms of crop diversity between households with access to presidential land and households without access to presidential land. You can see these numbers are significantly different from the simple two-sample comparison. And but these numbers, I mean, these estimates are statistical, both statistical and practical significant. These results suggest actually there is actually strong association between access to presidential land and crop diversity. So households with access to presidential land tend to grow at least one crop more than the households without access to presidential land. And again, we have here, because of data quality and other things, actually number of observations smaller than the 1200 here, and also the number of treated and treated is a bit smaller than because we had to remove outliers from the analysis. And in this table, we summarize results from OLS regressions, where we link crop diversity with the data diversity, and 4 different types of indicators. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we found actually strong correlation between crop diversity and data diversity, and also we found strong correlation between access to presidential land and data diversity. So this suggests that impact of presidential land on data diversity runs not only through crop diversity, but some other channels like productivity or reducing the risks and so on. And looking other indicators, we have actually many more indicators in the regression, but we report some of them here. Schooling seems very important for crop for data diversity, because maybe because of school meals program run by World Food Program and others in the country, and female education seems very important as well. And the households with migration, with migrants, seem to have significantly higher data diversity. Again, this is OLS. Again, we can actually improve our results if we can use better techniques. If we can use better techniques like propensity score matching and inverse probability weighting here. We summarize some results from kernel matching and inverse probability weighting and augmented inverse probability weighting techniques. Again, we here actually these numbers or coefficients are impact of presidential access to presidential land on data diversity. We found again these coefficients are different from ILS to some extent, but again, most of these coefficients are statistically significant, suggesting there is strong link between access to presidential land and data diversity. Again, we are not claiming here causality yet, but again, there is actually, you can see this So kernel matching is based on a pan-Chernikov kernel matching technique. We used actually some others like a normal and uniform and other versions of matching, propensity score matching technique. So again, summary of key findings. We had this actually in the beginning and the preview of the results. So if I have time, I would like to conclude with a few remarks about policy implications and future research. Household survey, as I mentioned, we did both household survey and qualitative research. So household survey and qualitative research within this study reveals serious failures in access to market. We are talking about market failures using the language of economists. So in access to various inputs, development of value chains and markets. So this is very important for promoting crop diversity as well as improving household welfare in terms of their data diversity. So policies and public-private arrangements to address such constraints are vital for future promotion of diversification. And of course, need for more and better data and evidence is very important for not only for Tajikistan, for other countries in the region. Actually, we talk a lot about evidence-based policy, but if you don't have data, better data, you can't do evidence-based policy without data. So I think national governments in the region, for example, in Uzbekistan, they start realizing that need for evidence or importance of evidence for policy making. I think a couple of weeks ago, President mentioned about this actually, especially with respect to, this was with respect to COVID-19, but it applies to other areas as well. If government is running all different kind of policy interventions or programs to improve, with the aim to improve household welfare or productivity, they need more and better data to see whether those policies or those interventions are producing the results. And unfortunately, actually, these policies or these interventions are ad hoc most of the time. And so governments should try to use innovative techniques, especially in Uzbekistan. There is actually a Minister of Innovative Development, and they talk a lot about innovation, but just by talking about innovation, you can't produce innovation. You need actually better data and the analytics to provide that evidence, and then you may achieve some results. So with this, I would like to stop here and thank all of you for listening. And I hope we will discuss further in the remaining 20 or so minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more thing, actually, in this presentation, I provided references, actually listed references, all, if somebody will later want to look this evidence and this, so this is, I think, just for benefit of researchers and viewers. Thank you.
Kamiljon, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Now, without further ado, I'll give the virtual floor to our discussant, IFPRI, please. You have 5 minutes. And I would like to remind our viewers, while we hear from our discussant, please feel free to use the Q&A function to send your questions. And I will read those after our discussant remarks. So, IFPRI, floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much, Dr. Akramov. It's very interesting presentation, and then very good good evidence to see that access to land has a very good impact on crop diversity as well as on food security. We have very nicely showed it with the survey data that having more land secures the food of the households as well as the crop diversity, which could be also interesting not only for the food security issue but also risk management strategy, because we know that crop diversification is also allows farmers to be on the safe side when more risks occur. Therefore, the selection of the from the methodological side, selection of the propensity score matching also sounds a very very valuable approach to use, because as you mentioned that the allocation of the presidential land was not random and based on several criteria, and therefore it's a very good alternative when we cannot control the treatment. It's a very good methodology to use propensity score matching, and the results also show very good good achievements. Dr. Akramov, I have only several clarification issues related to the presentation. I was very inspired to see the results, and then came to several questions came. For example, it makes now very interesting to see how this land was allocated. You mentioned that it was not random. And from the political point of view, since you have already proved that the allocation of presidential land is very important, it makes now to go one step further and to see what how this procedure was implemented, who has got this land, and if it follows clear rules. For example, if only poor has received it, or if only farmers living in a rural area received it, or if there are also some political connections play the important role, that the people have got the land, who has more connections. This makes it now very important to look at these aspects, and to in order to provide more straightforward policy recommendations to the government of Tajikistan, as well as it could be also interesting to other Central Asian countries. That's my one interesting issue came to my mind to investigate in further. And another issue what makes me very interested, we have shown the role of migration in food security. There's also a very interesting issue, and then there's also, if you could discuss on the role of migration on crop diversity, especially if it also has an impact on crop diversity. Because in some meetings I hear in Tajikistan that in the rural areas where a lot of people migrate, they have even a labor scarcity that to allocate certain issues. And another interesting issue came to my mind is the impact of land access to crop diversity, because in most of the cases we see that most of the cases we see even negative impact on land size, on crop diversity, because the larger farmers are mainly start to specialize on certain crops, technical crops, and do not go for small plots and labor intensive crops, and therefore it was a little bit like from the theoretical point of view a little unexpected to see that more land brings more crop diversity. If you could quickly discuss those issues. Thank you very much, Dr. Akramov. It's a very interesting presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Babajanov, for very interesting remarks, and I hope they're helpful for Kamiljon's work. So we're sort of approaching the end of time, and I want to read one more question, Dr. Akramov. Then you can probably respond. It takes time to respond to all the remarks overall. So So a related question was how migration and female education are correlated with crop diversity. So if you can also discuss that. And then there was a question on the size of the presidential land, whether that played a role, and what was the tenure rights across different groups. So, and this year, floor is back to you.
Thank you, Ikhtiar, for very valuable and helpful remarks. I mean, the comments and suggestions, and thank you for those questions. Actually, first, yes, how this policy was implemented a long time ago, about 25, 23 years ago. And we, with the help of our partners in Tajikistan, Tanzila Ergasheva and academician Jalil Pri from Tajik Academy of Agricultural Science and others, we tried to look at the policy documents, and also we talked with the people and how this, of course, as I mentioned, this was not random. There were actually probably many factors in play, connections and maybe some other things. But the aim of the government was genuine, to help poor households. Remember, this was after the civil war ended. And the Stade region was actually the place where the civil war happened. So a lot of factors were in play. That's why we tried to use actually this matching, why we decided to use propensity score matching and inverse probability weighting techniques. This helps to control or to take into account many confounders in the analysis. So yes, in the paper we will discuss this and with the help, actually, Jalil Pri and Tanzila Ergasheva helped a lot with this background information, how this was done and how this was allocated. So about the impact on crop diversity, yes, especially in terms of large farms, that's because scale plays very important role. Specialization and the link with the productivity is very important. But when you have smaller households or smallholders households, this is actually not always the case. And our paper, our analysis and some other papers shown that actually at the smaller scale, crop diversity benefits from more land. Again, there was a question about the size of presidential plot. On average, it was about 0.11 hectares, 11 sotka. This sounds small, but most of the participants, I think, know Central Asia, having access to 11 sotka irrigated land makes huge difference. Actually, if you add 15 circle of household plot, it's about almost a little more than half, 1/4 of the hectare. And if you use more efficient that land, it will help not only your data diversity, it will help your income and so on. So, and a question about the impact of schooling and migration on crop diversity. And that's actually not, especially migration is not obvious like in case of link to data diversity, because there is actually backward linkages from migration. When more young males they migrate, actually that makes impact on the efficiency of agriculture back home. So yes, it's still correlation is still positive, but it's not that significant like in the case of data diversity. And schooling, no, there is not much correlation with the crop diversity and schooling score.
It was female education.
Female, yeah, both schooling and female education. There is
okay.
not a strong or statistical significant link from those factors to crop diversity. But there is strong link from those indicators, those variables to data diversity.
Okay, so with that, we're approaching the end of time. So I would like to thank our speaker, Kamiljon Akramov, and our discussant, IFPRI Babajanov. Thank you very much for your time. I would like to thank our viewers for joining us today out of their very valuable time. So please join us next time to have Professor Anderson from Vanderbilt University. And I would like to thank our organizers who helped us to make this webinars possible for you. So that's IAMO and IFPRI colleagues. So with that, please everyone stay safe and healthy, and see you next time on Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.